This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest, the co-host of the War Starts at Midnight podcast. You know him from his previous episode just this last week covering Gone Girl. Please welcome back, Peterson W. Hill. Long time no see.
I know. Only a week. 6 nights.
So, you don't have to answer the questions this week. We can jump right into it if we really want to.
Let's do it.
All right. We are obviously discussing, I think, somewhat of a controversial movie by some standards, but a very beloved movie tonight. For our 232nd episode, we discuss Parasite for its 5th anniversary. At least for when it debuted in the United States. I will count that. Written and directed by Bong Joon-ho with Han Jin-won. Music by Jung Jae-il. And forgive my pronunciations, any of our listeners in Korea. I do not pretend that I will get any of this correctly. I will make an attempt, though. We also have it starring Song Kang-ho as Kim Kai-tak, Lee Seung-kyung as Park Dong-ik, Cho Yo-jong as Choi Young-jo, Choi Wook-sik as Kim Ki-woo, Park Sodam as Kim Ki-jung, Jung Hae-jin as Chung-shuk, Lee Jun-yoon as Guk Mung-wak, Park Myung-hoon as Oh Gyun-s, Jung Ji-zo as Park Dae-hai, Jung Hyung-young as Park Da-song, Park Hyung-rak as Yoon, and Park Seo-joon as Min Hyuk, and Jung Ye-shio as pizza parlor owner. The easiest one yet. Recognition for this movie? Parasite was released on May 30th, 2019 in South Korea after it had already won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival that year. Parasite grossed $71.4 million in South Korea, $53.4 million in the US and Canada, and $133.9 million in other countries, for a worldwide total gross of $262.1 million. It set a new record for Bong, becoming the first of his films to gross over $100 million worldwide. Deadline Hollywood calculated the net profit as $46.2 million. Anybody else that looked up where it ended up on the international box office for 2019? I mean, this was like the peak of domestic box office receipts.
No, I did not.
This is, certainly the most highly profitable foreign film of that year, right? But
actually, no.
2019 was more profitable.
I mean, there are a lot of films that I'm not familiar with, but that have definitely like some very foreign sounding names. Nija, The Wandering Earth, which both have characters following their names.
The Wandering Earth is one that I forgot. It came out in 2019, a very famous Chinese film. I started it, got about 2 minutes in, and I was like, this is not for me. I know that movie made a ton of money. I think it might be the highest grossing movie of all time in China. But I know there's Wandering Earth 2 as well, so that might be number one.
I mean, there's a lot of other ones in here where, like, the Chinese market is so robust that it definitely props up several films. And this is also the era where the Chinese market was propping up a lot of American box offices, or American film box offices. But this one finished 33 overall that year, just behind Men in Black International.
A movie everyone has seen, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone. In South Korea, Parasite grossed $20.7 million on its opening weekend. It closed its box office run with $72.2 million and more than 10 million admissions, equal to roughly 1/5 of the country's population, and ranking first among the year's top 5 films. Parasite ranked first in a survey by IndieWire of over 300 critics in the Best Film, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Foreign Film categories. It also appeared on over 240 critics' lists at the end of the year, including 77 who ranked it first. Parasite would be nominated for 6 Academy Awards for Best Production Design and Film Editing, and it won for Best Picture, Director for Bong Joon-ho, Original Screenplay for Bong Joon-ho and his partner Han, and International Feature. Parasite became the first non-English language film in Academy Awards history to win Best Picture. But it was not the first foreign film to win Best Picture, I should say. Parasite also became the first South Korean film to be nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and the second East Asian film to receive a nomination for Best Picture since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon from 2000. And Bong Joon-ho became the fourth Asian to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Director, becoming the second to win after Ang Lee. In 2021, the Writers Guild of America ranked Parasite's screenplay the fourth greatest of the 21st century so far. I did not, however, look up what the top 3 were in that category. So did anybody else?
I did not.
No. Oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe somebody will comment out there in the ether. Parasite currently holds a 99% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 97 score on Metacritic, and a 4.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd, as well as one of the 3 most logged films ever on Letterboxd all time.
What was that 3? I could probably guess it.
We just got tagged in a post on this because one of them we're going to be discussing in a few weeks.
Wait, so it was the top 3 what?
Most logged films. So when you watch something, you log it in Letterboxd.
Okay, so Parasite, Fight Club.
Correct. That was the most recent one to take the title. And I can't remember what the other one was. I want to say Andrew Corns of the Revisionist Almanac tagged you and I because we're getting ready to fight over Fight Club.
I'm going to say, pains me to say, I think y'all's episode from last week. Joker.
Caddyshack 2.
It might be Caddyshack 2. Yeah, okay. Hot Shots do?
Part 2. Part 2.
No, it's Men in Black International. That'll cut together nicely. So as we start each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
When it was nominated, we watched it, I think, we rented it and watched it at the house, I guess, and that was the first time I'd seen it, and that was the only other time I'd seen it until I watched it now.
Same. We watched it because it's been a project of ours for years, and you, for the most part, try and keep up with me on watching all the Best Picture nominees, although there are plenty of years where you miss one, like Avatar 2, The Way of Water, or Drive My Car.
I don't need to watch Avatar 2.
Both good. Avatar 2 is a good film. Very good film.
It's okay.
Okay.
I mean, it has its strengths and its weaknesses, but a 3-hour movie where it's visually stunning, but the story kind of leaves you a little wanting. Okay.
Oof, I don't know. Jimmy C's my guy. One of my guys. Not my guy. One of my guys.
I think he has much better achievements personally, but that's okay.
Well, Titanic's way up there.
T2? Anyone?
Not as good.
All right. Well, we can save the fighting for a few weeks from now when we have another opinion into the mix. But regardless, we watched this. I do remember paying for it, particularly because I still have it on my Prime, and it's in a list of 20 films that I have on my Prime account. And so that's what I fired up this week. I'm like, oh, I already have a copy of this. It's just saved on my digital account. So we had it, and I have not seen it since. I was kind of looking forward to having this on the list. I mean, I put it on our schedule for a reason, because I think it was dying for a revisit from me. But there is almost no time in the last 5 years that I've thought, man, you know what I haven't seen in a while? Parasite. I need to fire that up. I was kind of neutral on it when it first came out. And I have to admit, I took away different things the first time than I did this time, where the first time I'm like, I guess I can understand why people really love this. It's just not something that really appeals to me. And I'm a lot more respectful of the film overall, but certainly not something that I guess I'm overly excited by or that I was enamored with at the time or even now. Even though I think I was more impressed by the first part of it, kind of before the twist, and I kind of was undercut by the twist the first time I watched through it. Now, the second time through, I'm actually more impressed by the second half of the film, but it's a film I respect. I don't necessarily love.
This is a movie I love. I saw this opening day when it came out in Atlanta, which was kind of late. It was November 8th, 2019. I saw it a matinee. I skipped out of work that day, went and saw it, and didn't know much about it. I knew it was a bong joint, and the hit of the bong is always welcome. I love.
Yeah, a bong joint is conflicting paradigms or imagery here.
Yeah, so
same category, but two different things.
I'm always excited by what he's doing next. I like the host. I really love Memories of Murder. I think Snowpiercer is interesting. The pig movie, which is
Okja.
I think it's interesting, but I don't love it. So I was interested to see it. Was always excited to see what he's doing next, and I had to go see it because I knew it won the Palme d'Or, and I was like, I got to see this thing. And walked out just kind of blown away by the craft of it, knowing, that twist right in the middle of it, and just kind of leveling me in some way. And this is to me one of the great Best Picture winners.
I know a lot of people feel that way, and I have no real qualm against you. I think that this is one of the exceptional Best Picture years as far as just the overall quality of the nominees.
Sucks Joker didn't win, right?
Yeah. Fucking Joker. Anyway, no, with Joker aside, I mean, Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 1917. I mean, there were some exceptional films this particular year. I personally like several of the other films just a lot better than this one, but I don't know. There's maybe a screen between me and Korean cinema. I'm not as exposed to Korean cinema overall. This is the only Bong Joon-ho movie that I've ever seen. I've only seen it twice now. Once when we originally saw it, and now this time. I don't know if there's maybe some gap where I don't have the requisite experience or cultural background to understand some things with this. I mean, this is much more clearly understood than some other Korean films that I've watched, but I've heard there's a way to watch these that's a little bit different that maybe I don't pick up on.
I'll say two things to that. One, I think there actually is one better film of 2019.
Okay.
Well, you guess what that is. Well, I say my second point, which is there's a variance of tones in Korean cinema where it can bounce between deathly serious, like this movie does, and absolute absurdity in the drop of a hat. And I think that's one of the reasons why this movie, it's not as absurd as some of his other movies, but it skirts that line, certainly, which I think is why a lot of people latched onto it.
So let me take a guess or a stab at what you think is the best movie of 2019. It's Cats, the Butthole Cut, isn't it?
No, though I do love Taylor Swift.
Okay. James Corden, though, in a CGI
James Corden's in it too, isn't he? Yeah.
Yes. And I think Helen Mirren, or
no,
Helen Mirren plays oh god, what's her character's name?
Or is it Judi Dench in it?
It's Judi Dench.
It's Judi. Okay.
Yeah.
My bad.
Let me tell you this story. Okay, and this will summarize what I think somewhat of this film. Okay, this guy creates a piece or a bread, okay, using special ingredients and such. And no one wants to buy it. Okay? So his name is Thomas. This is his last name. And so he changes the name from just, like soda bread to English muffin. And all of a sudden, people think it's European, even though it's made in Boston. And it sells like crazy. This film is popular or more popular among cinemaphiles because it's foreign. If this were in English language, most people would find it rather dull.
I will not be giving out any of our socials or our email address at this point for people to send their hate mail to from Film Twitter.
That's fine. We're supposed to be a little provocative. I've decided I'm going to be provocative because I find this film a little boring.
You just went Dresden on this film.
It's a good film. Okay? Is it a great film or the best film of 2019? I don't think so. I thought 1917 was probably the best film of that year.
I mean, I'm personally a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood fan, but again, the depth of the overall year. I know that you're not an Avengers guy, but like Endgame, for what it accomplishes in that movie, I still think is an exceptional film. Just trying to pull in 23 different movies sparsely into something that's coherent by itself should have almost garnered, in my opinion, a Best Picture nomination. Ford versus Ferrari, one of the ultimate dad sports movies. That's in there. Knives Out, we're going to be discussing coming up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of great films.
So,
and yet somehow fucking Joker gets nominated for like 11 things.
I will say, you still have not said what my favorite film of that year is.
A Dog's Way Home.
No, it's Greta Gerwig's Little Women.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Which
okay.
I think is just absolutely incredible. Parasite would be my number 2, but Little Women is Saoirse Ronan is my favorite actress, kind of under 50 probably. But Parasite, this is. I don't think you have movies like All Quiet on the Western Front getting nominated without Parasite's win.
Yeah, I understand that, and I'm not criticizing it for that. It's a good film. It's just I'm having a hard time being the. Putting this on the pantheons.
No, don't back off of your take now. I
cannot find that. I do not find that this is the best film of that year. I don't find it even in the top 5. I mean, it was good and it was well deserved for a nomination, but I don't know. I don't get it.
All right, we'll move on. I'm sure we'll wrap back around to it, but I do think there's a separation between the legacy of the movie, as alluded to by Peterson, and the quality of the movie.
Yes.
I think those are two different things that can be separated. Personally, for me, that's a separate conversation when it comes to, let's say, Citizen Kane. I don't particularly find that movie to be a great movie, but I think the legacy is really high for obvious reasons. So, anyway, moving on. So what is the film actually about?
Class warfare. Or stratas within classes. It's all about the difference between those who subside or just get by versus the way that the wealthy look at the rest of the world.
In the battle for resources and in a fight over scarcity of said resources, who is on whom's side? Because when you're trying to crawl up the ladder to success, everybody's fighting everybody else except who's in your own family.
Nobody's on your side. I mean, nobody helps you, whether you're friends or colleagues. It's essentially your family is there to protect you and help you, and no one else. This movie has a really bleak look at capitalism, specifically. I wouldn't say the institution of capitalism. I'd say the people inside of capitalism, which is obviously, in turn, what capitalism is. But it's the people who operate and maneuver inside of it they only want to get up on themselves. And I think what this movie does brilliantly is there is no true villain, no true protagonist. Each person inside of this movie has their own agenda. And because of that agenda, they want to move upwards. Even the quote unquote rich family that should be the villains, they're not really the villains.
No.
Like, which I think is what is so smart about this movie is that they might be a little bit disconnected, but they are not villainous. They don't want anything bad to happen to anyone. At the end of the movie, when Mr. Park is concerned so much with helping his son, it's not necessarily that he's thinking about, I'm going to forget her name, but Jessica, the actual sister's name, I don't remember.
That's fine. We'll Anglophile this.
Yeah.
He's concerned about his son, and he's not thinking about the fact that Jessica has been stabbed. He's thinking about protecting his son and his family, not the fact that she's been stabbed. And she might have a more pressing injury because she obviously ends up dying. But I mean, this movie's about obviously that, but I mean, so much more.
The most poignant part of the film is where they're all living the high life. The Park family leaves for the weekend. They're all living the high life, sitting around their house, enjoying all the food and the experiences. And then they come home and they have to flee. And not only do they have to flee, they go back to their original place, which becomes flooded and becomes immersed in literally shit, which they have to go back to the reality of what their existence is. That in and of itself is the most poignant point of the film, where it clearly shows that no matter how much the lower class tries to rise up, they're still forced back down into the shit.
I mean, yes, I don't know if I have such a forgiving or optimistic take on the film as you, Peterson. I would say that not only is the film bleak, it's ridiculously cynical. I would say the only thing that I would take from the film that I feel like the director is trying to tell us is the strength of the familial unit, particularly as it is I would find a cultural thing, because obviously American families I don't think are quite as closely knit as like these family units are. And you do highlight that Mr. Park's concerned about his own family, Mr. Kim's concerned about his own family. Everybody kind of retreats to, I'm going to protect those that I care about the most. Instead of trying to do like a cost-benefit analysis of like who's the most injurious. Obviously, the Das Song is not in like any mortal danger. He's having a seizure or potentially something. He could have just simply fainted. I don't know. We never really find out. But in the instance where it's seemingly that he does not care about the actual potential loss of life of someone else, and in the course of, I guess, coming in contact with the person who so reveres him, he can't even stand the smell of him, that pushes it over the edge. Even though, after the fact, we see Mr. Kim specifically trying to say he's sorry for stabbing Mr. Park. And so, I guess, the ending, I'm a little bit confused as to what the overall intent I'm supposed to take away from the film is, even though I do think on a second watch it becomes clearer what exactly the themes of the film are for me.
Well, I think that moment where he realized Mr. Park is kind of tensing up at the smell, it's all about respect. And in Mr. Kim's eyes, it is, this man is dying. Like, have some decency. But Mr. Park can't get outside of his own sense of self. Because of that, he's cringing at the smell. Dana, you talked about the true, to me, tension-filled, maybe 40 minutes of the movie where it starts with them kind of having fun in the bath, having the alcohol, having the snacks, and then it moves into truly escalating into a moment where everyone's at conflict. You now have people risen from the ground upwards, and then, oh, now they've called. We need to clean everything, which I think is so beautifully handled. In that moment where Mr. Kim is under the table, and he feels that is the moment where he maybe decides, I really don't or care about Mr. Park. Even though he's giving me all this money, he is the reason I am now somewhat wealthier than I was 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, however many weeks ago it was. And he's now been slighted, and because of that, he's now in a situation where when they leave, they now descend down into essentially what is hell, right? The shit spewing, their house is now underwater. And the next morning, it's not a question of when Miss Kim calls and says, oh, are you guys okay? It's, we need you to come and take care because Da Song is having his birthday party. We need you to be here. It's the blinders that people set up with their own sense of self and their own sense of family, where my family is okay. Let's focus on that. Now his birthday party, this is going to happen. We're going to have this great party for him. And nobody else is going to think about that, because there are also some of the residents who live probably in the high side of town that didn't get any of the flooding.
I mean, that's an important point to make, but again, I would say that's kind of a cynical view of the movie overall. That if we're only concerned about our own family units, what does that say about our myopic view overall?
I think this movie is critical, but it's not cynical. I don't think Bong is necessarily saying, the rich are all evil, the poor are all, just trying to get upwards. It's the idea that we're all sanctioned into these boxes that, unfortunately, give us the opportunity and the leverage to only think about what is closest to us. And because of that leverage, it isolates you from everyone else, so that it's very easy for you to say, you know what? Actually, a great example is Hurricane Milton just came through. I'm safe in Atlanta. Tampa isn't, or Sarasota is not safe. And it's very easy to sanction that off in your mind and not think about other people that are affected by, whether it be capitalism, hurricanes, earthquakes, whatever it might be. The metaphor expands out from here.
I will go as far as to say that this film is actually the anti-American Western. Because the premise of the American Western is upward mobility, that if you can't get it by just homesteading and getting your own property and building yourself up from your own bootstraps, you resort to whatever means is necessary to achieve your ultimate goal. This tells you that no matter what you do, you are stuck within the parameters of your socioeconomic class and are not going to be able to have upward mobility.
And again, I would say that's inherently cynical.
And I will say that also ties back to the fact that what is Da Song obsessed with? Native Americans, right? So
that's a good
in the context of the film, he's obsessed with Native Americans, has probably no real context of what that means, but I'm assuming Bong Joon-ho has a lot of context of what that means. And obviously, American imperialism and American expansionism destroyed a way of life. And in some way, Mr. Park is destroying that same way of life in the future. I don't think he is knowingly doing it, but he is in some way.
Yeah.
In some way.
I mean, so one of the things that I really respected about the movie, watching it the first time through, is I felt that there were 3 different pieces to the film, or 3 different acts that I really felt were all different genres. The first one's kind of almost Soderbergh-esque con artist style film. The second part is like a true thriller. Once we get to the twist and kind of afterwards, as they're, especially that night. And then I feel like the elements of the birthday party, especially when Kevin goes down into the basement, right about that point where he's kind of creeping around, that to me is like the horror elements of the film. And yes, though all three of those things kind of blend together and whatever else to make one whole thing. But I guess one of the things that I really respected him about is to create a movie that kind of blends between or moves between these different kind of acts and tones while still maintaining its overall story quality and not feeling like it's a completely separate thing.
I mean, I think Bong's really good at balancing tones, which is a lot of what that is. And I mean, I think you're dead on. The first, third, maybe half even, is kind of a heist film.
Yeah.
And that turns into a thriller, a horror almost, like where you are truly, and this is what I think is so, I mean, that middle 40 minutes is so wonderful, where you were truly in the perspective of Parks and you're terrified. Like, you can't make a noise. You can't do anything. Sorry, flip that. The Kims, the Parks are the ones that
own the house.
Own the house. So the Kims are the ones you're in the perspective of, and the Parks you are kind of observing. And that moment where they start to, I guess, fool around is what you'd call it. I don't quite know what they're doing. Where he starts talking about the panties and, does that excite you? And it's this very strange kind of intimacy between them. And I think it alludes to the fact that because of their wealth and because of how wealthy he is, probably not being a particularly present father, their relationship has now become this completely foreign thing to both of them. And they don't know how to connect and have intimacy in any normal sense. And they're talking about, she's like, oh, go get me drugs. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's this sort of cosplay fantasy of, oh, you're the poor girl.
Mm.
It's kind of class appropriation in that way. But it's also 100% alluding to the fact that they are not connected as a family unit or husband and wife, where I think the Kims aren't in some way. I don't know how much like genuine kind of spark and emotion they have towards each other, but they really care about each other. And they're there and want the best for each other in some way, if that makes sense.
So, Dad, are you ready to dig more into this film? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho, is a masterful blend of dark comedy, thriller, and social commentary. The story follows the impoverished Kim family as they cunningly infiltrate the wealthy Park household by posing as unrelated, highly qualified workers. With each deceitful step, they inch closer to the luxuries of the upper class. But beneath the humor and suspense lies a searing critique of economic inequality. Bong expertly balances tension and satire, leading to an explosive, tragic climax that reveals the fragile illusions of both the rich and the poor. Parasite is a brilliant, disturbing exploration of class warfare, where the true parasite may not be who we expect.
Thank you. Did you know? Kiwoo's job at home tutor was chosen because director Bong Joon-ho realized that sadly, the job is the only way that families from two extreme ends of the class spectrum in modern-day South Korea can cross their paths convincingly in the story arc. Did you know? According to editor Jin Mo Yang, he edited the film in Final Cut Pro 7, an editing program that Apple stopped supporting in 2011 on a computer that hasn't had a software update since 2014. He received an Oscar nomination for his work. Did you know? In an interview with Korean magazine Cine 21, director Bong Joon-ho spoke of his experience in filming in a hyper-rich Korean home. He said his hand literally shook from anxiety when he was returning a trash can that was used as a prop. The trash can was of a high-tech variety that stayed silent even when the lid was being closed and cost as much as $2,500 US. Still, he was baffled by the cost, saying, "What the fuck? What kind of idiot would buy a trash can that's going to smell anyway?" Did you know? The film makes several nods to Alfred Hitchcock throughout. Stairs are used as a motif, voyeurism is used as characters watch scenes through windows 14 times, and most obviously, there's a brief glimpse of an out-of-place Alfred Hitchcock collection in the Parks' home. Did you know? Stairs and vertical structures are a motif that runs throughout the entire film, which highlights the social divide between the Parks and Kims. In fact, the director, Bong Joon-ho, called the project a staircase movie while filming it. And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 233rd episode, we welcome back Rob Conlon of the Westport Studios and Walter Gaynor II of Boss Locks Media to discuss The Incredibles for its 15th anniversary, written and directed by Brad Bird, music by Michael Giacchino, starring Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, Jason Lee, and Samuel L. Jackson. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. I'll just be glad to have some Anglo-Saxon names to pronounce next week.
Incredibles hits 20 this year, not 15.
You are correct. Yeah. Wow. I'm going to have to rewrite that.
Makes me feel old.
Yeah, 2004. All right. Before we get too much further, and I know that we just asked it last week, but for people who did not listen to our Gone Girl episode, Peterson, what's going on with you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm at Workshops Midnight. We've got a back catalog that you're more than welcome to look at. About to start writing a little bit more at psychodrivein.com. Been a little bit busy with day job that pays, so please check those other sites though. And there's the two big ones. So it's psychodrivein.com and Workshops Midnight Podcast. And then you can check me out on Instagram or Twitter at Peterson W. Hill.
Excellent. And you will be on with us a few more times yet this year, so people will have a chance to catch up with you then as well.
Very true.
Including Fight Club in a few weeks.
We don't talk about it, though.
No, we definitely didn't talk about scheduling today.
Nope.
Not at all. Didn't happen. Don't know what anyone's talking about. Plausible deniability. But
luckily I look like Brad Pitt with my shirt off, too.
No objections here. Although I've never seen you with your shirt off. Not that I'm asking to in this setting. Well, we just went to an X rating on YouTube. Glad I always check off that this is not for kids. Okay. Anyway, moving on. It's time for everyone's favorite segment. That's right, it's Ask Dana Anything. Well, we don't have any submissions. Mwah, mwah. I should have a sound effect for that.
I can do one. Let's see.
Oh,
okay.
So, Dana.
Yes.
Your son is in law school.
Yes.
God.
Would you?
I want to have like 2 hours where I don't have to think about this shit.
Would you?
Okay.
Groom him to be in law school, or would you choose not to? From a young tyke age, not from now.
Okay, he can answer this question.
Okay, let's rephrase the question just slightly, okay? I know you have never specifically pushed me to be in it, but would you have rather, are you proud that I ended up choosing a career in law, or would you have rather seen me do something else?
That's probably a more elegant way of saying it, yeah.
And it doesn't matter your answer because I'm obviously on a specific path at this point, and I owe a lot of money to people that I can't really back out of.
I honestly do not have an opinion on this, which is, I mean, yeah, I'm somewhat flattered that he decided to follow the same career path that I did, but by the same token, I would understand completely if he wanted to go in a completely different direction and seek his own sunlight. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, when he was struggling to find a path, yeah, I would say, you ever thought about, going to law school and taking over this? If he said no, fine, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I had actually expected that he would never do it. And then he suddenly announces at 34, well, yeah, I guess.
See, so my dad went to law school, ended up owning a financial planning firm, and I know that he hoped that one of his kids would follow in some path similar. Not necessarily law or financial planning, but something similar. And that happened 0 of 4. Truly.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about my kids, and a few years ago we were wondering, is public school in Georgia going to be sufficient for them? Like, do we need to really think about private school, which would have been a stretch financially, but, we would have made it work because it's our kids and, we love them to the moon. My dad said, well, I sent 4 kids through private school, and, that was expensive. Looking back now, probably $20,000 a year per kid times 4, that's $80,000, 80 a year. Take that by let's just say 8 years, $640,000 right there. Boom, just out the window. He said, I thought maybe one of you guys would be Harvard or Stanford or Yale or maybe even my alma mater, UVA. And that didn't happen. 2 of his kids never graduated from college, and the other 2 went to University of Alabama.
Harvard of the South.
Harvard of the South, yeah. Roll Tide, baby. So, I get the idea. My dad said, very clearly, you can send them to private school, but that doesn't mean they're going to be going to Harvard or Yale.
Yeah.
Which, I would probably not have enjoyed Harvard or Yale, I'll say.
I think it takes a special personality to enjoy those places.
Yeah.
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 Maybe a Parasite Redux.
True.
I mean, you could, think about it. You could easily you give David Fincher 6 weeks.
He already did it. That's what Social Network,
He spends the Social Network into Parasite overnight. 100%.
A Parasite Social Network crossover.
Which, I know they're remaking this movie, so Adam
McKay.
Adam McKay's...
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a TV series
show,
spin-off that's like Americanized somehow. I don't know.
Yes, it's a group of people who all work at a Chick-fil-A.
Why Chick-fil-A? That's
I
like
don't know,
premium
it just popped
fast
in my
food.
head. A Chick-fil-A, and they all strive to get into the franchisers.
It's their pleasure. It's their pleasure, always. Which granted, Atlanta.
We're going down that route. There's going to be a lot more sex scenes. Parasite in a Chick-fil-A gives new meaning to the term chicken fingers.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. I'll ask for your legal analysis on this because there are 2 things that stuck out to me about the ending of the film. One, in an Americanized version of this, like posing as somebody else or a qualified worker in this capacity would not be prosecuted as fraud. They wouldn't even get probation. So that was kind of strange to me that is like against the law in Korea to like pose as somebody else. It would cut down on a lot of our weird resumes that we do get, but
Yeah.
2, when Kevin wakes up in the hospital, they're reading him his Miranda rights. They refer to him as Miranda rights. That's an American legal term. Do they have like such a thing? And not only do they say it's just the Miranda rights, but they're reading them almost verbatim. So is this like something adopted by the Korean democracy?
It's
It
so
might
close.
very well be. To be perfectly honest, remember the Japanese Constitution was written by?
Douglas MacArthur.
Yes, completely and solely. He wrote it and imposed it as the supreme commander of Allied forces in Japan, occupied Japan. He just said, here's your constitution. You will adopt it. And so he just imposed American law. So there's a lot of commonality between American law and Japanese law. I would assume that's the same situation in Korea.
I mean, I could see it in a post-war world, especially when we had the Korean War, that with the formation of 2 new governments, theoretically, that we would have a major influence on them as a democracy or a burgeoning democracy on their course of law. But I just, to see another country adopt it and refer to it as such, especially because if we would have helped them, Miranda was decided, what, in 65, I think?
64 or 65.
Yeah, and we would have been helping them form their democracy before that. So is that like somehow borrowed? Is that something they designed only for an international audience? I guess I'm not sure where that comes down, but it struck me as odd.
The Korean War ends in what, in 57 officially?
52.
52, geez.
No, excuse me, 53.
The Korean War was 53.
Okay, so
53. Eisenhower
okay.
ran that I will go to Korea. And then, he wins he runs for office. He goes to Korea. Then he comes back, he wins. And then he says, if we don't resolve this, we're going to nuke everybody. And so all of a sudden they go, oh, well, let's negotiate.
Well, and there's the one overt reference to the war. When Mr. Kim is driving and he says, I know every road beneath the 38th parallel, which, is very pointed. Nobody says a 38th parallel.
Yeah, well, the reason they have the tunnels is in case North Korea attacks.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, so much of this movie, is hyper-specific to Seoul, but also it translates so easily to America. I mean, that was part of I think the brilliance of the movie is how easily it's translatable to what we face on a daily basis.
I mean, it's a very tiny country. I don't know size-wise what it would be equatable to like American states, but I can't think it's like all that much bigger than
I would
West
say
Virginia.
like Georgia. I'd say like Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee.
Yeah, I think it's about the size of New Jersey.
And is it that small? Really?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's about the size of New Jersey, and I think with about as many people per square inch as New York City.
Okay, so I think we're all wrong on this one, because just pulling it up and trying to Google it, as far as geography, it's comparable to the size of Portugal or Hungary or the U.S. state of Indiana.
Indiana, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Which honestly is not too very far off of like a Mississippi or an Alabama.
Or probably New Jersey. It's probably not that much bigger.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I think it's important to just think about space in this movie and what money can afford you. And
yeah,
just the idea of, I live in the suburbs of Atlanta, and I could, the money I could spend on my house in the suburbs gets me 600 square feet in the city.
Yeah.
And just that tiny little expansion out means I can get 3 times the size, more space, more greenery, which I think is so important to the Parks house. You look at that house and then look out, and you don't see another house. You never see another house in the same frame as theirs. And because of that, there is this sense of calm, this sense of purpose, and that it's like the ideal living situation. They truly have this oasis in the middle of what we are very aware is a bustling city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the things that doesn't always translate well between especially East Asian film or even like Southeast Asian film is just the nature of how many people there are comparative to like how spread out the US is. Maybe if you're like from New York, you can kind of appreciate it a little bit better, but we still don't have literally people on top of people in the way that they pack them into Tokyo, Seoul, places in China where they're just in these tiny little places just trying to exist.
I would say this movie, I think we don't see them packed in necessarily.
Well, not in
And
the
I think
Park
that's more of a
household,
budget.
yes.
I think that's more of a budgetary constraint because we are very aware of how packed in they are. Because
But think of the layout, though, of the Kim apartment where the toilet, like, you can't even fully sit up straight because it's up on that, like, shelf area.
so I'll say I am 6'4". It would be miserable being in that apartment.
Well, I suppose we've kind of already verged back into the rest of the movie, but let's keep kind of on schedule. So, wrap around. We left off at best performance. Dad, who did you have down?
Bong Joon-ho.
I did as well. Peterson, 3 for 3.
Easily taking the head of the bong here.
Yeah, there are so many execution elements to the film that I think both from a visual style, but as well as he's the primary screenwriter, despite the fact that he said publicly he hates screenwriting. But the tone that we talked about before, the production design and trying to get the technical aspects to work, being on a smaller budget, but still making it feel very lived in, and that like there's a no issue with any of the casting whatsoever. So all of the different aspects overall to me are why I would go with him. It's such a controlled execution on multiple different levels. If you're looking at anything that I truly respect, it's how all of the small details in this lead up to the overall. Even though I'm still kind of like middling on the film as a holistic approach to it. Like, it just doesn't capture me. There are still a lot of things that I could respect about it, and it's primarily due to anything that was in his effort.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, it's a beautifully directed film, beautifully written, and I think to this date, his finest film. I've seen them all. Memories of Murder is probably the closest, but this is so elegant and while also being strange and really unique, which I don't think's talked about quite enough because, you know, it'd be very easy to watch this movie and not have the strange moment where Miss Kim walks down into the basement. She sees what is a very kind of shocking moment. I remember seeing it in theaters and seeing the former nanny kind of propped up, trying to open the door or open the, I guess, cabinet or whatever you want to say. And she is struggling to get it open. And it's this very almost like supernatural moment because you don't know quite what's happening.
Well, yeah, she's horizontal. I mean,
it's so strange. And it happens with nobody saying anything about it. And then she's, oh, help me, help me, help me, help me. And she pulls the tray out and then she falls. And it's beautifully directed. I think this is just expertly directed, so well written. Yeah, I mean, Bong's the clear standout here.
all right. So if we were to move on to secondary performances, since we're in alignment here, I have Song Kang-ho or Mr. Kim as my best secondary performer. I think he's the standout from all of the actors. I mean, collectively, I said that this is a very well cast film, and it is. I mean, there's a reason that they won Best Ensemble for SAG and several other ensemble awards just collectively as a unit. But I think if there's any one that truly stands out to me, it's his ability to gravitate between kind of the silly moments of the film where it's more comedic and he's kind of got a certain level of style, but he's got to be simultaneously this kind of goofy dad at the same time, the one who's also the like wise, profound dad.
Well, he thinks he's wise and profound. I think
some of the things that he does say, though, do lend themselves to that. And some of it has to do with just general experience. But there are pieces, like when he's talking about I don't ever have a plan, don't make plans. To me, that's like the moment where he truly shines. But then you still get the birthday party moments where he acts in a moment of like haziness. I still think he is, to me, the standout performer among the overall cast if I'm going to single anybody out.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be right there with you. Song Kang-ho is incredible in this film. And I will say, I mean, he is in, I think, every one of Bong Joon-ho's movies. I know he's in Memories of Murder. He's so good there. He's in The Host. He's also in Snowpiercer for sure. I don't remember him in Okja. I'm sure he's there in some way. But yeah, I mean, 100% without a doubt, I love Song Kang-ho in this movie. Just a wonderful actor in general. Another one of his performances. I love his Thirst. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend. But yeah, Song Kang-ho for me.
I'm not seeing him on the primary cast list though for Mickey 17.
Well, that's rude.
I have the same.
Okay.
I did find it interesting that his primary, he's not really predominantly an actor. He's a producer. So.
Anyway, all right. I guess we're having a lot of overlap tonight on choices, but I'm going to hope that we break the mold a little bit on charismatic and went with some oddball choices, particularly because I think I went a little off the board from everybody else in choosing Cho Yo-jong, Mrs. Park. Apparently not.
No, you didn't.
Ah, darn.
I love her. I think she's wonderful in this film. I will stray a little bit. I love the music by Jung Jae-il.
Oh, sure.
I think the soundtrack is really interesting. I'll say, 2 weeks in a row, or at least 2 weeks of me being here, not dissimilar to the Gone Girl soundtrack, where it's a little bit hypnotic and a little bit kind of eerie while also being kind of smooth and relaxing. But I think this soundtrack gets you in a beautiful headspace.
So, Dad, why Mrs. Park?
I don't know. She just, every scene she was in, she lit it up.
First off, she's a very attractive woman. So
yes.
That helps. And I say that with a Y chromosome floating around in me. But I think just how kind of played up she has to go on some of these things. Yes, she's aloof and she's the like rich housewife who understands that she doesn't cook very well, and there's kind of those light moments of it, but there's nothing more charismatic to me than her reactions during the art therapy scene.
I love those moments. Do you remember them kind of having this weird exchange where they sort of hold hands but not really, and then they like shake hands, and it's this very abnormal moment between them that sort of alludes to the class differential in one way, but also kind of gears you up for knowing, one, that Mr. Kim smells a little bit, but also crosses the line, which is what Mr. Park is always talking about. He gets close to the line, but doesn't cross it. He touches her hand, but he realizes, oh, she's not reciprocating. I'm going to now hold her hand or shake her hand.
Let's go to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. The aforementioned art therapy scene. I have peach allergy. I have the basement, which I will just say is what I refer to as the twist, or how I kind of labeled it, if we will. I have the birthday party, and I have epilogue. Any other ones to add?
Not from me.
I mean, I think the best scene is just the extended moment where they're under the table. I don't know if that's included with the basement, but that moment where
I mean, it
under
could
the table.
be, but I didn't really have it quite under that same umbrella.
I love the moment where they're under the table and they're forced to stay there for an extended period of time. And it does kind of dehumanize Mr. Kim in some way. And then you get this weird kind of sexual exchange from the Parks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so filled with tension. And then you've got that great moment where the two kids have left, and then Mr. Kim is trying to crawl out, and Da Song calls on the walkie-talkie, and he just stops. And the framing of the moment is you see him, and you can basically visualize his feet, and that's it. You're like, just keep going, just get out of there. Which is also one of those great Hitchcockian moments where you're like, I want him to get out of there, but also, like, should I want him to get out of there? In some way, I should be sympathizing with the people that their home is being invaded in some way. I love that scene.
So out of these, then, we have Art Therapy, Peach Allergy, The Basement, Under the Table, Birthday Party, and Epilogue. What is the best scene? Personally, for me, I have The Basement.
As do I.
I think it's the most pivotal scene, and because of the tonal shift, it's the one that has to work the best.
I mean, it's tough to argue against it. I love that scene. It's only 90 seconds later that Under the Table starts, so that to me is the moment that really, it's kind of the emotional turning point of the movie. I think the plot turning point is The Basement. I think the emotional turning point is the Under the Table.
The only reason I would say it's The Basement is just, again, the tonal shift. And it could feel so sudden that it takes you out of the movie, and it doesn't. So because of that pivoting between kind of a goofy heist film you had mentioned before, I guess that's a pretty good term or an apt term for it. And then kind of taking on this thriller aspect where it just completely pivots in overall tone. If that shift is so dramatic that it takes you out of it, I don't know if the rest of the movie works for anybody. They don't buy it. It doesn't feel earned. In some ways, he was very masterful in having that scene there, but feeling earned. And so that's why I would say it has to be the linchpin of the entire movie, relies on that scene.
Well, I think in the moment that solidifies it and kind of gets you on board with it is you're so curious about what's happening, and then you walk downstairs and you see the former housekeeper horizontal. And that's the moment where I'm like, it preps you in your mind where you're like, I don't know quite where I am anymore. Which I think Bong Joon-ho is so good at. He makes it almost alien in a sense.
Yeah.
I love that moment. I'll say the 40 minutes between the babysitter, them drinking to through the toilets exploding, all that. I think that 40 minutes or 30 minutes, however much it is truly some of the best cinema you could ever have.
As far as favorite scene, I have the Art Therapy. I just find it so goofy. And again, going back to my most charismatic with Mrs. Park, her reactions. Did something happen in first grade? And the shocked, reaction. I love that entire moment because you're like, what the fuck is going on? How could she possibly know that? But you know that they're pulling some type of ruse.
Favorite scene, I'm not sure if I'd say my favorite, but I think the moments that unlock it a little bit for me are when Mr. Kim is driving Mr. Park. It's only a couple of scenes, but every time they're in the car together, we get Mr. Park's kind of somewhat controlling but isolated reactions. And it's these very calculated moments where he is being driven and he's like, oh, do you love your wife? And he's like, I guess you can call it love or something along those lines. It's these very calculated moments. And we get a little bit of the tension between the two of them without it being truly adversarial. It's just a little bit of tension that needs to be cut, if that makes sense.
Me, favorite scene is the peach allergy. I just the extent that they went to manipulate and to create the situation and how subtle it was, I just thought it was great.
Oh, I love the ending of that, though. Did you wash your hands? Most indelible moment, though, for me is always going to be the birthday party. I mean, for some it might be the twist, but because of the nature of how the film ends, to me that's what sticks out.
I agree, because when I watched it the first time, that seemed so out of place. It was just like all of a sudden, boom, this happens, and you're like, what? And I watched it again, and I knew what was going to happen, and I still said, what?
It's hard to disagree, but I the moment where she's horizontal, pushing open the door, is just a image that will be sealed in my brain forever. It's so strange, and until that moment, I mean, there's been some odd moments, but there haven't been anything that strange. So I think that moment where she is trying to push open the door.
So that looks like a great spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Cissy Houston, 91, American singer, the Sweet Inspirations, and actress, The Preacher's Wife, Grammy winner in 1997 and 1999. Johnny Neal, 70, American musician, the Allman Brothers Band. Alan Bly, 87, Alan Bly, 87, Canadian-born American television writer, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, and actor, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Ken Page, 70, American actor, Ain't Misbehaving, Cats, The Nightmare Before Christmas. And Gavin Creel, 48, American actor, Thoroughly Modern Millie, The Book of Mormon, Hello Dolly, Tony winner in 2017.
And so we remember these here fondly with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Well, I don't really always know when we do these foreign films, especially non-English language films, how Best Funniest Lines works. We're going to make an attempt at this as best we can. I only have 4 nominees, partly on that basis, because the translation, I have no idea. But there are 4 things that I kind of tried to pull out of this.
I've got 7.
Okay. Well,
she should go first.
So, first one. Chung-suk, if I had all this, I would be kinder.
Kai Tak, or Mr. Kim. You know what kind of plan never fails? No plan. No plan at all. You know why? Because life cannot be planned. Look around you. Did you think these people made a plan to sleep in the sports hall with you? But we are here now, sleeping together on the floor. So, there's no need for a plan. You can't go wrong with no plans. We don't need to make a plan for anything. It doesn't matter what will happen next. Even if the country gets destroyed or sold out, nobody cares. Got it?
Kai Tak. Rich people are naive. No resentments. No creases on them. Chung-suk. It all gets ironed out. Money is an iron. Those creases all get smoothed out by money.
Moon-gwang. Don't fucking call me sis, you filthy bitch.
Kim Ki-woo. Sure enough, the perspective of a young artist eludes understanding. Or perhaps it's Desong's expressive genius.
Jun-si. Respect.
Chung-suk. Why didn't you put up a know your name sign? I told you. Kai-tak. No, it sounds like that just make them piss even more.
Gyun-se. Honey, this send button is like a missile launcher.
I'm out.
Park Yun-koi. He has a Basquiat sense, even at age 9.
I'm out as well, so if you have any left.
Got 2 more, so... Kim Ki-jun. Shut the window. Kai-tak. Leave it open. We'll get free extermination. Kill the stink bugs. And last one. Dong-ik. You still have those cheap panties? The ones Yoon's girlfriend left behind? If you wear those, I'll get really fucking hard. Park Yi-kun. Really? Then buy me drugs. Buy me drugs. Dong-ik. Eat this instead.
All right. Let's move to the Stanley rubric then. Legacy is up first, and just a recap for anyone who is a new listener to the show, this is a measure of the legacy of the film within, well, it's supposed to be for 5 years after the film came out, but since that is technically this year, and at least for the United States this week, we're going to be kind of guessing as to what the legacy is kind of right now and will be into the future. So we break this category down between the audience and the industry. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
Alrighty then. So for anybody that's kind of listened this year, I kind of started doing my own, I guess, if you've ever experienced a rubric before in like grade school and the teacher hands you a specific list and it has what's a 10 and what's a 9 and etc., so that you kind of have an understanding and you can craft your responses or whatever for your essay to exactly what each one of these things means. For me, I have it a 4. It's on a must-watch films list for most critics, and it changed industry practices. I think this movie kind of highlights both of those aspects. 5 is kind of a reserved place for films that were like the number 1 grossing film of all time and had specific energy behind them. They were on like the top 10 all-time critics lists and appear often on like TCM type of thing. You know, they're regular stays. People kind of accept that there is a particular 5. Now, this hasn't had enough time where it's been out to get kind of the classic status, and we'll get to that category in a little bit. But I would say that it is notable that this is a fairly highly watched film among film fans. But as far as the industry, I have it somewhere between a 4.5 and a 5, even though I think there are a lot of people that might embrace this as a 5. Audience side of things, though, this is where it always gets a little bit trickier as far as our scoring goes, because how do you incorporate the casual fans and pop culture at large, particularly given that we're all American, and so it's kind of hard to always see the international community on things, especially for a movie such as this, where there's obviously a large international following comparatively to other Best Picture winners. What I will say is it's almost universal that all the film nerd community has seen this movie. Enough to the point where we've suggested it to other people and tried to get them to watch it, the casual community, that it extends a little bit beyond that. But outside of maybe South Korea, what is the casual film fan flocking to with this film? So I, again, have it somewhere around kind of that 4, where I would say the casual film fan or the normies have heard of this as far as its cultural relevance because of how important this movie is as a moment for not only the Academy Awards, which I think it's probably a bigger moment for the Academy Awards than it is for like overall the history of film per se, unless you attribute that the Academy Awards is like the timekeeper of the history of film. I would possibly argue against that given how many times we figure that they have gotten things wrong. But I still don't think that this is translated so far across the audience landscape that people who are casual, even just a remote subsection of casual film fans, feel like they need to have seen this movie to understand culture or be up to date on pop culture. It's not that translatable of a film as far as I'm concerned. So I have this at a 4.5 for the industry and a 4 for the audience for an 8.5.
I also have a 4.5 for the industry. for a lot of the reasons you outlined, which is foreign language films, foreign made films have more poignance and viability in the American market and among the industry than they did previous to this film. But for the public, other than cinemaphiles, there are not a lot of people who have watched this film. You'll mention it and they'll kind of go, is that like some sort of Asian film that I think was... People do not know it. It is not highly seen outside of the cinemaphiles. And, it had some buzz internationally and it had some buzz, initially, but I'm at a 2 for the public. So I'm at a 6.5 overall.
I'm not sure that I would agree on the standpoint that we have to factor in the international community. And I do think that was translatable. And given that we have previously rewarded other films that were big in individual countries, so we had a Japanese film in Your Name that we rewarded somewhat on the backing that it was like the #1 film all time in Japan. Now, I don't think Parasite is the #1 all time South Korean film. I don't know, but I haven't seen that in any of my research, so I don't know if I could hold it against that per se. But we had also done the same thing for Three Idiots as far as Indian cinema. So how, even though we're kind of in a Americanized version of this, can you make a determination that it's that low when there is at least some level of fervor for it, at least in South Korea, and I would say also in Japan, where it did very well?
Just looking, it's the number 24 for South Korea.
All time?
All time.
Okay.
There's one other Bong film that's higher, which is The Host.
Okay.
Very good film. Stranger and weirder and, sillier. But I think kind of indisputably, this is a 5 on the industry side. I don't think you have... And obviously, this hit at a weird time. So this won Best Picture. And then, a week later, COVID happened, right? Or maybe 2 weeks later? It was almost immediately. I don't think this film comes along and wins Best Picture without rising ships like Squid Game, which is something I had not seen. But I don't
But Squid Game is after this.
No, I know. So I don't think the general American public is saying, oh, let me check out this Squid Game, if they are not accustomed to what Bong called the 3-inch barriers of subtitles. I think this film starts the trend of us being more accustomed to subtitles and foreign cinema.
I know cinephiles don't want to hear this, but I would guarantee that there's a statistically significant amount of people that watched the dub version of Squid Game.
There might be. I don't know. I haven't seen Squid Game. I'm not. I don't know anything about it really. I know it's kind of a horror-esque show.
Yeah, I suppose.
So I think 5. I really do think where the industry is now, with having at least 1, if not 2, foreign language films up for Best Picture and Best Director, you're not having that without Parasite.
Well, I wouldn't give that responsibility, though, to Parasite. I don't think Parasite's win is available to it or has the voting base or of enough of a voting base to get behind it without Oscars So White expanding the international base of what the Oscars voting body is.
I don't disagree there. I think that's probably accurate.
because they've really expanded how many people actually vote on the Oscars, and it's become a much more important international film award system where that is like the preeminent award of film, comparative to what it started out as, which was a marketing ploy for only American films specific to the studio system.
Yeah, I think 20 to 25 years ago, the films were not necessarily interesting. They were well made, but they weren't necessarily interesting. And I think now every Best Picture winner, whether I love it or not, is always interesting. You're shaking your head there. Well, all right, let's rewind 6 years. Green Book. We can erase that as interesting.
that might be one of the odd ones. I mean, Nomadland is fine, but
we can. I like Nomadland quite a bit. I think it's a really wonderful film. We can scrap that because that's a COVID year.
Yeah, I suppose.
But any of the other years around here, I think they're all interesting. They're all different. I think Coda as well as that's certainly a COVID year. So you have 2 COVID years, and then what this past year was Oppenheimer, which I think is an incredibly interesting film.
Yeah.
Really well made. Certainly, I mean, whether you think
to be fair, like Oppenheimer's the most conventional Best Picture winner since probably Moonland stole it from La La Land in this kind of weird. Yeah.
So hold on.
So like Spotlight right before that is probably a fairly conventional winner. But until that point, like you want to count in Shape of Water and Moonlight, and even Green Book is somewhat like, yeah, it's somewhat conventional, but it's still this kind of racial tones movie. We have Nomadland, we have obviously Parasite. Everything Everywhere All at Once is kind of a unique winner. Coda is a representative of like a disabilities movie. So I do think that there is a diversity inclusion aspect to this as opposed to more conventional choices. Oppenheimer to me is maybe one of the more safe conventional choices of what they used to do as far as.
I would say that it's a biopic about Oppenheimer, but watching it is a really tricky examination of Oppenheimer.
Sure.
You could have watched, I don't know, Ron Howard's Oppenheimer.
Well, okay, sure. But what I mean by conventional is that it's white people historically in a room talking.
I don't disagree there. It is white people in a room talking. That is Oppenheimer.
Well,
that is Oppenheimer. But I think Nolan's way of telling that film, which my gauge of this was my parents, because my dad and stepmom enjoy movies, but don't necessarily. They don't be challenged too much.
Like, don't get me wrong. It's a very good movie that we both picked to be the best picture, what we thought was the best movie of last year. But it's still, I would say, more of a safe pick than some of the other ones that they've had in recent years.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and I mean, and then go back the farthest, I guess, I guess as far as trickiness goes and kind of stepping outside the box, Shape of Water is probably the closest it gets to being able to take a nap during. So that certainly is harder.
At least it wasn't said by us. At least not this time.
And I love Del Toro. I think he's so wonderful. But I think Shape of Water is just kind of it's a slog.
Yeah, I much preferred Nightmare Alley, but okay.
Oh, yeah. Nightmare Alley, I much preferred Crimson Peak. I mean, Pan's Labyrinth. I mean, shit. Give me Pacific Rim.
But to narrow back in, we still need a score from you.
So yeah, I think I'm going to go 9 across the board. So 5 for the industry. I'm going to give 4 for public. So 9. Yeah.
So that is an 8 average between the three of us. All right, let's go to impact and significance. I have this slightly higher in only that the industry is, I think, to a greater extent impacted by the first non-English language film to win Best Picture was a big moment. I mean, everybody kind of understood in the moment. I kept hearing critics, Parasite was the one I kind of want to win. I don't think it will win. It'll be 1917 or it'll be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or, one of these conventional safe picks. But I really like Parasite. Like, that was the one that stuck out to me. And then when it wins, they're like all kind of self-congratulatory that we finally got this other film to win. So I think from a historical perspective, in the moment, it was a big deal for the industry to kind of congratulate itself that we went from basically the conventional choices to all of a sudden we're going to reward this South Korean film that most of the general public hadn't heard of, and that a particular president of ours criticized the next day, saying, "Where would the days have gone with the wind?"
Donald Trump didn't like this movie?
No.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Shocking, isn't it?
Well, it's anti-North Korean. And we know that he was writing love letters to
I didn't even catch that. That was the timing of that was so good.
It's so bigly.
We need to keep moving, Dan. All right, so I have a 9.
I have, for the industry, I have a 5. And for the public, I again have a 2. So this does not resonate with a broad spectrum in this country. And I mean, the number of people I've talked to in the last few days that I've mentioned this film, and they go, "Oh yeah, I haven't seen it. I've heard of it." And
you're
so
definitely influenced by the people that you're around. But who the fuck in central rural Wisconsin, where there are all the Trump signs lined up, just driving into work every day, there's probably about 27 of them lining my drive, like it's somehow announcing his presence or a parade for him, are going to be watching this movie. Move to an area where there's some more like-minded people.
Okay, I just, I have a broader thing than just central Wisconsin, but still.
Who are you talking to that your expansive experience outside of this anecdotal?
So what, I'm supposed to just I'm supposed to by telepathy understand what people in Massachusetts and Arizona are thinking? I don't know.
I love this movie in the Grand Canyon.
I looked at the numbers. It didn't like destroy the market as far as rental or download or streaming. It did okay. All right, I'll give it a 0.5 point up for the public and the initial. So I'll go 5 and 2.5, so 7.5.
I think this is where I start to think about scale and where something fits within its genre. And so I think without a doubt, 5 industry, no questions there, because obviously Best Picture winner, first foreign language film, and really redefines kind of subtitled films and subtitled entertainment for the next several years. Now where the public comes in, and that's where I start thinking, do I judge this in the same capacity that I would judge something like Transformers? No, I don't. So I think it's cultural significance for the public. It was an important film of the year. It made a pretty high grossing film for an original film that year. Was it as high as 2019 Endgame? No, wasn't that high. But I think there's no question this movie made an impact with a certain subsect of people. If that's the entire public, no, it's certainly not. So I think it's easy to go 4 for me. So right at 9.
So that's an 8.5 between the three of us. All right, Novelty. On this one, I have been experimenting, although at this point it's been several months. but with splitting the category as we have for impact and significance and legacy between the execution of the idea and the originality of the idea. So in this one, for a novelty score, I think this is somewhat novel. I mean, obviously it's kind of a original idea to an extent. It is borrowing a few tropes, but given the fact that I think it works in 3 different genres, 3 different tones, there's a lot of things going on in here as far as what it's commenting on. And while some of its commentary is not necessarily new in the ways like on a comment board, you're not going to necessarily be the first one to always attempt to say something. But does it have something new to say? I do think so, yes. So I would probably give it a 4 on how original this is or how it feels to me. Then again, I'm not as familiar with Korean cinema to really be the greatest judge of that. This is somewhat based on a gut feeling. But on execution-wise, I would probably go a 4.5. I think this is a very highly executed movie. Again, going back to the fact that the production design, the editing, the filming itself, we've kind of given a lot of applause or accolades to all of the technical aspects of the film, the casting. I think this is a very well-made film. I would give that a 4.5 on that side. I have an 8.5.
Yeah, so I will say execution, I'm going to end up pretty high here. So I'm going to say, to me, the execution is a 5. And I say that in the sense that when Spielberg makes, let's say War of the Worlds, I don't love that movie, but the craft is so expert and kind of pulls you through. And I'll say the first 3/4 of that movie are so good. And then the script kind of lets me down. So in that regard, that's why I think of craft. So I think 5 on the craft side. And then novelty, is it that interesting? I don't know. I think 3.5 on that side for me. So I'd round out at 8.5. And the reason I say a little bit lower on the novelty side is because it's not reinventing the mold by any means. It is bringing certain things to light, but it's not doing it in anything that's out of the ordinary, I would say. So I think 8.5 between the two is where novelty to me really sits.
Okay, this is where I'm going to differ with both of you, and I'm going to probably have higher scores. Okay, I think the originality of this is really high, and I'm going to give it a 5 for originality. Because to me, the fact that you've mixed multiple genres and styles together created an unusual originality. It's kind of like, you hear about all the like Mexican, Asian fusion foods and all that. That's kind of what this is. It's fusing multiple styles and genres together to create something fresh and completely new.
I really love that new Scottish Ethiopian restaurant.
Yeah. Haggis. Yeah, whatever. It is in Ethiopia. Haggis rice or something, yeah. For execution, I'm going to give it a 4, and I'm going to give it a little point down. This film was 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think it could have been cut and made a little tighter in points where it kind of was a little slow at times, especially towards the front end, and probably been tighter if it would have been about a 1 hour and 50 minute film. So I give it a little bit down for the execution. I think they could have cut out a lot of stuff that was kind of boring as far as I'm concerned. So I gave it a 4. So I'm at a 9 overall.
Had to ruin the average.
Yeah, well, that's the way it goes.
Double D making it sloppy.
That's why you have a calculator. And you don't need help with the math, right?
Correct. It's an 8.67 average between the 3 of us. Classicness. Dad, you can lead.
It is so hard to do classicness on a film on 5 years.
Yeah, it is.
And so I sat and pondered this, and I'm like, no, I start with a 7, and I don't go up or down, and I'm just going to leave it right at 7 because I can't assess it any better than that.
Yeah, I've had some struggles with this as well. I kind of was in the same territory when it came to Joker when we did that a few weeks ago, and
10,
when
right? 10, right?
Yeah, sure. Thankfully, we
20, actually.
didn't judge the classicness of Joker before the sequel came out.
Oh man, are the reviews just I mean, people who are trying to give a good review are going, "Oh, this is just shit."
It doesn't really have a timelessness factor. It's way too early for that. We kind of discussed that with a lot of films that are probably in the last 20 or so years. It kind of burgeons when it gets closer to like 20, 25 years in that kind of range where I would start to question whether it's a bit timeless. I mean, on that same point, though, one of the other areas where we can grade something up a little bit, like, I don't find any negatives on this film other than maybe a weird association with one of its casts. Was it in prison or had some legal troubles? And yeah, it was.
So he died in a parking garage because of drug use. It was being investigated. Bong actually wanted to be investigated. So, yeah.
Either way, it's a weird circumstance that I don't mean to bring up here because I'm not holding that against the movie overall. I mean, it's not like it's a tragic figure or somebody that's like been canceled since or something to that effect. It doesn't affect my watching of the movie. Frankly, I don't even know which cast member it is. So
it's Mr. Park.
I wondered, but okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Park. And Bong wanted to open a full investigation. I don't know if it ever happened, but yeah.
Either way, the one thing that I found, I guess, to maybe give it a point up was in its perception of the separation between classes and the growing wealth gap that I think is evident more right now in a difficult economic time worldwide than it probably was when this film actually came out. And even though we've had a widening gap for probably 30 years between the ultra poor and the ultra rich, as this movie is kind of really highlighting, I don't know if I can give it any more than maybe a point up for commentary on that in a culturally stylized way. So I ended up at an 8, partially because I wanted to give this a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but it is really hard to judge anything within 5 years of how classic it is.
I'm going to go a little bit from you, Tom. And the reason is, when I think about classicness, I take away the cell phones, which are the big thing of this movie that really date it into something post 2000s. And I think you take those cell phones away, and I think this is easily translatable to any possible time frame. I'm not going to go too much up from you because I do want to leave living room, because who knows what happens in the next 10 years.
Sure.
Maybe this just ages poorly. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to age really well. But I'm going to put it right at a 9. So it should put us at an 8, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
We had a 7, an 8, and a 9, giving us an 8 average. All right, rewatchability. This is probably going to be the most controversial of the scores. I will let everyone hate on me to start with, but I also have my kind of broken down rubric for our Kieran B test. My score for putting it on is somewhere between, I would put it on kind of if I had to, and maybe I should watch it every few years or so, but I feel more obligation than anything else to do so. I will somewhat reluctantly put it at a 3 there, that I should watch it every few years, even though I don't know if I would maybe willingly do so, because again, I don't really relate to this film or find it as fun or as exciting as other people. As far as leaving it on, it's somewhere between I'd watch 5 minutes if there's nothing else on, and I'd probably watch a few scenes if I saw it on cable somewhere. I just don't find this, though, to be something that's like readily available to me in the way that other recent Best Picture winners might be. Like you're streaming across HBO or any of these other channels. Maybe Oppenheimer's on, or well, Coda can't be anywhere other than Apple, but Everything Everywhere All at Once probably has a chance to be on cable TV more than Parasite does. So I'm at a 5.5.
So this is a tough one because the Salted Can-Be test, and I'm going to extend this just a little bit because I'm thinking I just took a shower. I'm at a hotel. Got my towel wrapped around me.
This is a hypothetical. This isn't like right now. I mean, you've already done a striptease on this episode, yeah.
So I've got my towel on. I hop on bed, and it's a little cold, right?
Where are we going now?
Okay.
But Parasite's on. How likely am I to say, you know what? Let me get dressed quickly, or let me just kind of sit like Jerry Maguire does on the edge of the bed in that movie at the very beginning and kind of get locked in. And I feel like this is an easy 4 and 4 on both sides. I think an 8 is pretty easy because I think this movie's a lot of fun. And if I see it pop on, I'm probably going to finish it, or at least watch a couple of scenes. The other thing is, I think I'm most probably going to watch every couple of years. I'm gonna put this thing on. So I think an easy 8 for me on the Can-Be, but also I just got out of the shower in my hotel room test.
Well, for me, I'm going to implement the same overall test, but I'm going to add a point for if I put this movie on, can I force my wife out of the room?
My wife likes this movie, so.
Okay, well, what? Yeah.
Because she hates this film.
Yeah, she viscerally hates this movie.
And I have no idea exactly why.
I mean, she does the same thing with Lost in Translation. Is this really all that complicated?
I can't imagine hating this movie, though. I can imagine being like, I didn't love it. But where's the hatred come from?
I have no idea. My mother has very strong reactions to films. And if she can't follow the plot at all, or if it's not like very easily given to her on a silver platter, like she hates Fargo because that movie is like subtlety. It's very thematic. The plot is kind of, it's somewhat relevant, but it's
not to mention that it teases fun of Minnesota.
She does not like anything abstract that is not immediately easily knowable. She wants a very simple plot line that she can follow. She is a Pretty Woman, Gone Girl-esque, she's been on a lot of these other movies that we've been on. Romantic comedies are in her wheelhouse. Little Women is in her wheelhouse.
Good film.
Parasite.
Good film.
Not so much. She can't quite follow the different tones and whatever.
Yeah, she's very typical in a lot of America, which is, I want to be entertained. I don't want to think. I don't mean that to be mean or derogatory. I'm just being honest, which is,
I get it.
When she, I don't want to be, I don't want thought provoking. I want to be entertained.
You're probably right there, and that's why like Wedding Crashers will be more watched than probably Parasite ever will be.
Yeah. So
let that sink in, Letterboxd.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need a score.
All right, so I'm at a 5.5 also.
So that's a 6.33 average between the three of us. So for audience score on this one, we had a 90% for Google users and a 90% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 9.0. So to recap the categories, we had an 8 for legacy, 8.5 for impact and significance, an 8.67 for novelty, an 8 for classicness, 6.33 for rewatchability, probably drags the overall score down, and a 9 for audience score, giving us a final total of 48.5, and currently placing it on our big overall list, just above Sunset Boulevard and below Batman Begins. You can't make this shit up, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Batman Begins, but come on.
I like Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, I think Sunset. No shade to Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
This is the 210th film on the list. It is going to be number 75 currently.
Wait,
it's not that bad.
Tom, with Gone Girl, wasn't Interstellar like right above or something?
No, it was
on the other side.
So the ones around it were Rope and Gentleman's Agreement.
Yeah, okay. Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm thinking. In fact, the Dark Knight's number 1 of all time.
Well, to be fair, Dark Knight Rises is 141.
I like Dark Knight Rises.
It's a fine movie.
Anne Hathaway's great in it. She's wonderful in that movie.
I will say they will be recovering Sunset Boulevard next year as one of our revisits for its, what would that be, 75th anniversary?
70?
Golden.
She's 75.
Such a great film.
It's a wonderful film. Yeah, I mean Billy Wilder's fist pump.
I know.
Again, for anyone who has any disagreements with us, which I think the entire Letterboxd community has to feel attacked by this point in the evening, you can write us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can send us your Joker thoughts or Joker funny ado. Or you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/GModePodcast. Any of our socials at Gmode Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd, and Twitter. Film Twitter, I'll love this. And finally, you can also find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmode Podcast. Remaining questions for this one. I really didn't have any. I kind of already shot my one with, does Korea have Miranda rights? I guess if you were to ask another one, I'll ask a similar question to the one that I did when we were finishing Taxi Driver, but does the, I guess, flash forward, is that a fantasy or is that in actual reality?
Oh, that's fantasy, 100%. Yeah, no doubt.
I think it's alluded to by the fact that it comes back into the modern, or like in the current time frame, but you could take it as that it's a flash forward if you wanted to.
I think you can take it as I think the family in some way rises up, but I don't think he buys that house by any means.
I mean, it would be very difficult for him to do so, but
that house is not cheap.
No. So any remaining questions for either of you?
I have one. Do you think more than 50% of Americans could find South Korea on a map?
50%?
Yep.
No.
I would have thought before I started interviewing people for jobs that, yeah, sure. Now I'm not so sure anymore.
I don't think highly of the American education system right now.
Yeah. But quite frankly, the concept that we have that public or private or whatever institution that's teaching you is by itself going to make you an educated, well-rounded, intelligent person is bullshit. Okay? The term is autodidactic. If you are not spending the rest of your life trying to learn beyond what you get from education or school districts, you are screwed. And that's where we come up. We've created a whole society where people think, well, I've graduated, I have a degree, so therefore I'm done learning.
What was the old quote by, what's his name? The guy who wrote Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain.
No,
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, don't let school get in the way of education.
Yeah.
Like, it's a big thing where it's like, school's only a portion of your education. You know?
Sure, but I do think culture also has a high degree of how you turn out on an educational level. Like, if your parents focus on that being an important part of your life, they're constantly trying to be on you about being educated, you may not care, but there may be some of it that rubs off on you just on a simple thing like vocabulary, on
100%.
what your diction is.
My dad, I mean, every time I would use bad grammar, he would say, "Is that what you're supposed to say?"
Yeah.
Are you supposed to say it that way? And he would go back to it. But the same thing where it's like, I mean, not that film is the ultimate parameter, but when you think about what books a kid reads, it's like, that's the same kind of thing.
Or that they read books at all.
Or at all.
So I want to thank our guest for being back with us this week as well. You will be next with us, I believe, for the aforementioned Fight Club. But
we don't talk about it, though.
But remind everybody where they can find you and what you're working on.
You can catch me at Twitter and Instagram at Peterson W. Hill. You can catch me at the podcast War Starts Midnight and at psychodriving.com.
Excellent. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
There's several films that I'm looking forward to that are being released this month and early next month. My number one film that I really want to see is Conclave. I love Ralph Fiennes. I love John Lithgow, and I love Stanley Tucci.
So you mean the film that I mentioned for this project that we did for Andrew months ago that I said, boy, this is going to be a real Dana movie. And then you subsequently forgot, and I brought back up when they was starting to make the festival circuit, and you're like, what is that again? And then I told you, and now that you've seen it in the New York Times, it's now like top of your list. Okay, I'm so glad that you listened to me.
What'd you say?
Yeah, I knew that was coming. As far as remaining thoughts for me, fuck no. I don't have time for extra thoughts. I don't have other things I'm going to see for the next 3 years. I'm in a dark dungeon.
Oh, this is so wonderful. Oh. Just remember what I told you, which is law school is like having a root canal through your anus.
Regardless, 3 years. Okay. Purgatory. Yep, got it. Anyway, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. You tell me where my suit is, woman. We're talking about the greater good. Greater good? I am your wife. I am the greatest good you are ever gonna get. Next week, for our 233rd episode, we welcome back Rob Conlon of Westport Studios and Walter Gaynor II of Boss Blocks Media to discuss The Incredibles for its 20th anniversary, written and directed by Brad Bird, music by Michael Giacchino, starring Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, Jason Lee, and Samuel L. Jackson. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ryan Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.